second graders. Well, we now know that there's going to be no more school the rest of this year. So this is what we'll be doing. So let's get right into chapter 16 here. Another quest for Celeste. Chapter 16, Learning to Read. To read, I better have my glasses, huh? Mrs. Hirschberger still has lots of blunders, FYI. I just have them at home now and not in front of all you guys. The long distance and the cold winter made more treks to Pigeon Creek difficult and sporadic. Sporadic means he didn't go all the time. Abe was limited to practicing his reading at home. In the evening, the family gathered around the smoky fireplace or crawled under their quilts to stay warm. Pa would whittle or smoke his pipe quietly. Whittle is where you take wood and carve it into shapes or things. Mama would knit or patch torn clothing with needle and thread. Celeste would curl up, warm and snug in Abe's pocket, listening to the pops and crackles of the hickory logs burning. Abe would stare into the flames, thinking. Sometimes he would pull down one of the few books that sat perched on a shelf, and then trace along with his finger, rough and calloused, the magical shapes and figures that marched in rows across each page. He's talking about the letters and the words. Celeste would poke her pink nose and dark eyes over the edge of the vest pocket and follow along too. At first, the little symbols on the pages looked like fleas on a white dog to Celeste, and it seemed as though Abe thought the same thing, as he struggled at reading. He struggled slowly over each letter. Finishing each sentence was harder than hauling water uphill. Mama would glance up from her needlework and see him getting frustrated. The more you learn, the more you'll be able to help others, she would say. Yes, Mama. And the better you are at reading, the more you'll learn. Now start again and read me another sentence. And here's a picture of them reading by the fireplace. After weeks and weeks of watching and listening, Celeste began to see something. Abe understood that certain symbols meant certain sounds. The sounds put together meant human words. Word by word and page by page, Abe became more confident. The day was cold, clear, and windless. The bare oaks and chestnuts glistened again against the glare of the blue-white snow. Abe, with Celeste snug in his wool coat pocket, was out in the small barn, tending to the cows. Belle was giving him a half pailful of frothy warm milk. Good girl, he said. There he is, milking his cow, Belle. Mama will make some biscuits with this, I reckon. He gave the brown cow a pat. She eyed him patiently, her breath coming out in steamy clouds. Outside, Pa was perched on top of the smokehouse, braving the cold and repairing the roof. Half a pail, Pa, Abe hollered up. I hope old Belle don't go dry, he added. Pa nodded. Back inside the little cabin, Abe draped his coat over a chair near the fireplace and then poured the milk into an earthenware crock. Mama was busy stirring something over the fire. She didn't notice Celeste as she wiggled out from the vest pocket and made her way along the top of the dresser. The shelves above were lined with an assortment of interesting things. Crocks, a pitcher, a jar of feathers used to make quill pens, and several books. Celeste sniffed at the books. They smelled of leather and also of musty, inky paper. She studied the brown leather spines. And here's Celeste by the books. They had markings that reminded her of the shapes that Abe scrawled on the slate at school. Stew's on, Mama said absently. She cut chunks of warm cornbread from an iron skillet. Wash up before it gets cold. Thanks, Mama, Abe answered. He hurriedly washed his hands in a crock full of melted snow. My husband was making faces at me. I'm recording, you know. He noticed a shadow move across the shelf in front of him and looked up to see Celeste nosing her way across the books. What are you doing? He whispered. You're not supposed to be wandering around. He gathered Celeste up in his hand, putting her in his vest pocket. He glanced back at a book on the shelf. He stuttered, studying the book's spine. He thought for a moment and then slid the book off the shelf. What's Abe doing, looking at a book for? Matilda asked. He's going to eat it for dinner, John giggled. Abe, food is on the table, Pa hollered. Abe tucked the book next to him on the wooden bench. The cornbread was buttery. The stew was thick with potatoes and corn and venison. Venison is deer meat, if you didn't know. Abe savored every bite, glancing repeatedly at the book by his side. F-A, he whispered to himself. The dishes were cleaned and put away. Another log was thrown onto the fire, and Abe sat in its orange glow, studying the book in front of him. Celeste perched on the edge of the book. F, he said quietly. F-A. He glanced up at Celeste, who swished her tail this way and that, straight and curved, following along and making the letters as Abe said them. Abe grinned. Yes, that's right, he said. F-A. So while he was reading the letters, Celeste is making the shape of the letters with her tails. With her tail. See, there's a blunder. Pretty smart she is. He kept at it, repeating the letters as Celeste formed them. F-A-B-O's. He read, following along with his finger and touching each letter. F-A-B. I got it. Fables. Celeste flicked her tail this way and that in congratulations and Abe continued his attempts with Celeste helping along. Fables, he said proudly. Next, O-F. That spells of. Now A-E-S-O-P. Aesop. Aesop. Fables of Aesop. Celeste wiggled her tail, forming the letters in rapid succession, Abe laughing out loud with delight. Mama looked over the quilt she was stitching, puzzled. What have you got there? She asked. Nothing, Mama. Just learning my letters. He quickly slipped Celeste into his pocket. Eventually, the family went to bed, all except Abe. The fire crackled and sizzled. Outside, under a half moon, a great gray owl called out through the trees and across the frozen, crusty snow. Another owl answered back. Abe continued to struggle across the page, with Celeste quietly acting as his assistant. The letters came a little easier as they kept going. As the fire dimmed and bedtime drew near, Abe was several sentences into one page. And here's Abe with Celeste helping him, and there's the great gray owl. One evening, Mama looked up at Abe, who was laboring over Fables of Aesop. She rummaged through her sewing basket and found a pencil stub. Sharpen this for me, Pa, she said. Pa whittled the tip of the stubby pencil. She gave it to Abe. You should be learning your letters. Writing it is just as important as reading it. What do I practice on, Mom? Mama hesitated, glancing around the room. Paper was a rare commodity, which means they didn't really have any. You can practice on the back of that wooden spoon. Abe planted himself in front of the fire with a large wooden mixing spoon in his lap. Celeste watched as he took the pencil stub and began writing across the flat bowl of the spoon, slowly and methodically, almost painfully. Start yourself out simple, Mama instructed. Just the first 10 letters. But I want them wrote out 10 times. 10. And when I have you do your spelling words, I usually only have you do them 3 or 4, right? Celeste watched from the vest pocket, fascinated with the curves and bends and tiny lines of the letters. She watched closely as Abe laboriously drew the shapes in a row across the wooden spoon. Once he'd run out of room, he'd rub his letters out and start again. But he grew frustrated. Mama, I don't think I can do more tonight. Mama looked at him patiently. Scrawling the letters seemed to mean something important to her. All right, she said, but I've got it in my mind that you're going to be the one in the family to read and to write, and make something of yourself. Now head up to bed. Each night was much the same as Abe struggled with his reading and writing in front of the fire. He would get frustrated and want to give up. Reading the letters felt like getting corn to grow in a drought. A drought is no rain in a season, and it's very hard to grow a plant with no water. But between his stepmother's prodding and Celeste's dark brown eyes encouraging him, he kept at it. There he is, practicing. One night, Celeste peeked down from the loft. The living room was quiet, the fireplace just glowing embers, although the wind roared through the treetops outside. She crept down the ladder, scurried to the sewing basket, and crawled inside. She found the pencil and then carefully carried it back up the wooden pegs to Abe's sleeping loft. There she sat for a while and chewed the stubby point until it was sharp again, then laid it next to Abe's pillow. And here she is, crawling down, I guess. Yep, I lost my... Maybe that will help him practice, she said to herself, curling once again into a ball in her sleeping box. When Abe awoke just before daylight, he found himself staring at the sharpened pencil. Now how do you suppose, he murmured. Celeste watched, whiskers twitching. The next evening, Abe sat before a smooth shake shingle and tried again. A shake shingle, I'm pretty sure, is like the shingles for a roof. And I suppose it acted like a chalkboard for him because they didn't have chalkboards. I mean, they didn't have whiteboards back then, so he used it like a chalkboard. This time, Celeste sat on the edge of the shingle and watched his every line, every stroke. She tried to copy the letters using her tail to mimic the shape. When he made a straight line, her tail was straight. When he curved a line for a letter, Celeste's tail arched and curled. The more Abe practiced, the more Celeste did too. Abe watched, half amused, half amazed, as Celeste's tail flipped this way and that. As he wrote a C, Celeste's tail became a C. He wrote a D, and Celeste's tail was straight, and then a curved arch. All right, something tough for you, he said, and drew a K. Celeste's tail stuck straight up, then at an angle up, and then an angle down. Abe's eyes lit up. Let's do more. They practiced and practiced as the fire turned to embers, and then to ashes. Then Abe lit a precious candle, and they practiced some more. That was the end of chapter 16. So it seems like Celeste is learning how to read and write pretty much right along with Abe. So pretty smart mouse she is. And next time will be chapter 17, a new book. Pretty sure, yep, a new book for Abe. Okay, stay well, second graders.